The night was cold. The wind carried a sharp bite as it rushed through the tall pine trees. In the middle of the dark forest stood a small wooden cabin. Smoke rose slowly from its chimney, and a dim light flickered through one narrow window. Inside, a man sat alone near the fire. His name was Daniel. He lived here far from the towns, far from the noise of people. He wanted peace. He wanted silence. But sometimes the silence was heavier than company. Daniel stared into the flames. They danced and cracked, but they did not speak. The loneliness inside his heart had become normal, like an old wound that never healed. He had grown used to hearing nothing but wolves howling at night and birds calling in the morning. He told himself he was fine. He told himself he needed no one. That night, as the storm gathered outside, he heard something strange. At first, it was only a faint sound. It was not the howl of a wolf, not the cry of an owl. It was softer, weaker. He stood still, his ears searching through the storm's noise. Again, the sound came. A cry, high and trembling, almost like the voice of a child. Daniel's heart jumped. He took his old lantern and opened the cabin door. The cold air slapped his face and rain hit his skin like needles. He lifted the lantern high and looked into the trees. The forest was alive with shadows. Then he saw movement, two shapes stumbling through the mud. A tall figure bent over something smaller, holding it close. "Hello?" Daniel called, his voice uneasy. "Who's out there?" The tall figure froze. For a moment, silence ruled the storm. Then the smaller figure let out another cry, weak and pained. Daniel stepped forward, his boots sinking in the wet ground. As the lantern's light reached them, his breath caught. It was not a woman, not a child, not human. The taller figure was thin, its skin pale and strange, with a faint glow under the rain. Its face was not like any face Daniel had seen, eyes larger, darker, filled with exhaustion. In its arms was a small creature shivering with the same strange features but softer, younger, like a frightened child. Daniel froze. His mind screamed danger. He had heard of strange lights in the sky, of stories told by drunk hunters about visitors from the stars. He never believed them until now, and now they were standing right in front of him. The tall one raised its head. Its lips moved, but the words were broken, almost impossible to understand. "Please, help." Daniel's grip on the lantern shook. Every instinct told him to run back into his cabin, lock the door, and pray the storm would drive them away. Yet his eyes fell on the smaller one, the child. Its tiny hands clutched at the figure's arms, its body trembling with cold and hunger. It was not a monster. It was a child. Just a child. Against his fear, Daniel spoke. "Come inside, quickly." The tall figure's eyes widened in shock, then in relief. It stepped forward, carrying the child, and Daniel led them into the cabin. The warmth of the fire wrapped around them. The mother, if that was what she was, fell to her knees near the fire, holding the boy close. Steam rose from their wet skin. The boy's breathing slowed as the heat touched him. Daniel stood near the door, still unsure. His heart pounded as he watched them. He was letting strangers in, not strangers from another town, strangers from another world. The woman lifted her eyes to him. They glistened with tears. "One night," she whispered, her voice rough but clear. "Only one night." Daniel hesitated. His mouth was dry. He nodded slowly. One night he gave them food, simple bread and soup. The mother ate little, giving most of it to her son. The boy's eyes lit up as he tasted the food as if it was the first time in days. For a brief moment, the sound of a child's soft laugh filled the cabin. Daniel felt something stir in his chest, something warm he thought he had lost long ago. But the peace did not last. Outside, through the storm, he thought he heard a sound, a heavy thud in the distance. Then another, like footsteps but larger. The woman stiffened. She turned her head sharply, her eyes full of fear. She whispered something in a language Daniel could not understand, and the boy hid his face against her shoulder. Daniel's skin crawled. He stepped to the window and peered into the darkness. The storm hid everything, yet deep in the forest he thought he saw a faint light moving between the trees. Cold dread filled him. Someone or something was searching. He turned back to the woman. "What's out there?" he asked. She lowered her head, refusing to answer. The boy trembled in her arms. Her silence was enough. She was running from something. Something dangerous. Something that was now coming closer. Daniel's hand tightened on the old rifle that hung by his door. He did not know what he had invited into his home or what was chasing them. But he knew one thing. This night was only the beginning. And outside, in the darkness, the hunters were already near. The fire burned low in the cabin. Shadows stretched across the walls and the storm still raged outside. Daniel sat on his wooden chair, his old rifle resting across his knees. His eyes never left the two strange guests by the fire. The alien woman and her child huddled close, their wet clothes steaming as the warmth pushed away the cold. Daniel's mind raced. Hours ago he had been a man alone, thinking only of his quiet life. Now he was staring at creatures from another world, sitting on his rug, eating his bread. Every part of him wanted to ask questions. Who were they? Where did they come from? Why had they chosen his door on this stormy night? But the fear in the woman's eyes stopped him. She looked like someone who had run far, someone who carried secrets too heavy to speak. The child shifted closer to the fire, his large, dark eyes reflecting the flames. He held a piece of bread with both hands and chewed slowly as if savoring every bite. For the first time since they arrived, Daniel noticed something soft in the boy's face. Not alien, not strange, just a child. A boy who had been hungry, frightened, and tired. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The boy tilted his head as if he did not understand. Then he whispered something, a short word in a language Daniel could not place. The woman gently stroked the boy's head, repeating the same word. Perhaps it was his name. Perhaps Daniel would never learn to pronounce it. The man cleared his throat. "I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're here. But if there's danger out there, I need to know." The woman's eyes met his. Her lips moved, forming broken words in English. "We only stay one night. Please. We go after." Her voice was soft, pleading, but firm. Daniel could see the fear behind her calm. She would not explain. She could not explain. He sighed and sat back. One night, he told himself. Just one night. Then they would leave and his life would return to its quiet rhythm. Yet a part of him already knew it was a lie. The forest did not sound the same. The storm was not the only thing outside. The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of the fire and the whistle of the wind. Hours passed. The boy slowly lay down on the rug, his head resting on his mother's lap. His breathing grew calm as he drifted into sleep. Daniel watched as the woman pulled a thin blanket over her son, her hands trembling with care. He saw in her the same love any mother carried, human or not. But then he noticed something strange. Marks ran along her arms. Thin, dark lines almost burned into her skin. They were not wounds from nature. They looked carved, branded, as if done by someone with intent. Daniel's stomach turned. "You're hurt," he said quietly, pointing at the marks. The woman quickly pulled her sleeve over them. Her eyes grew cold, distant. No hurt, just past. The word hung heavy between them. Daniel wanted to push further, but her silence was a wall he could not break. He returned to his chair, gripping the rifle tighter. The night was not over, and something inside told him the storm outside was not only weather. Suddenly, the boy stirred in his sleep. His lips moved, whispering. At first, Daniel thought it was a dream, but then he heard it clearly. The boy's voice fragile and fearful. "They will find us. They always find us." Daniel's blood ran cold. His eyes darted to the window, to the forest beyond. The storm masked every sound, yet he felt watched, as if something out there waited for the right moment. The mother hushed her son, pressing her hand gently over his mouth. But the damage was done. Daniel now knew they were not lost wanderers. They were running, hunted, and whoever hunted them was close. The man stood and paced slowly across the wooden floor. He looked at the woman again. "If someone is after you, if they're dangerous, you need to tell me. You brought them here, to my home. I need to know what I'm facing." The woman lowered her gaze. She rocked her son gently, as if the rhythm alone could protect him. Her lips parted, but no words came. Daniel pressed further. "Who are they?" The fire cracked loud, sending sparks into the air. The storm roared, and for a moment the cabin shook as thunder rolled across the sky. The woman finally spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "Hunters." Daniel froze. "Hunters?" She nodded once, her eyes wet with fear. "They do not stop. They do not forgive. They take." The silence after her words was heavy. Daniel's mind spun with questions, but none mattered now. Hunters. Whoever they were near. He stepped to the window again, peering through the glass. The storm blurred everything, but in the distance a faint flicker of light moved between the trees. Not lightning, not fire, Something unnatural, methodical, searching. Daniel's grip on the rifle tightened. His chest rose and fell faster. He was just a man with a wooden cabin, an old gun, and a lonely life. He was not ready for war, yet war seemed to be knocking on his door. He turned back to the fire, to the mother and son huddled close together. The boy slept uneasily, the woman's eyes locked on Daniel, silently begging for mercy, for safety. One night, she had said. Just one night, but Daniel knew the truth now. One night would never be enough. And outside, the hunters were already coming closer. The storm outside grew quieter near midnight, but Daniel's heart only beat louder. He sat by the window with his rifle resting across his lap, his eyes fixed on the forest beyond. The alien woman and her son slept near the fire, their shapes small and fragile against the flickering light. Yet the silence of the forest was wrong. It was too sharp, too empty. Even the wolves did not howl, and the owls had gone quiet. Nature itself seemed to hold its breath. Daniel had lived long enough in these woods to know what that meant. Something was moving out there, something unnatural. Then he saw it again. Between the trees a light drifted, cold, white, and searching. It cut through the storm's mist like a blade. His chest tightened. It was not fire. It was not lantern. It was a machine, Daniel whispered to himself, so it's true. Someone is hunting them. He glanced back at the woman. She was not fully asleep. Her eyes were half open, glowing faintly in the firelight. She was listening, waiting. When she caught his stare, she shook her head slowly, as if to say, "Do not go outside. Do not let them see." But Daniel could not sit still. He rose quietly, boots pressing against the creaky floor, and moved to the door. He opened it just a crack, letting the cold night air in. The forest lay before him, dripping with rain. Between the trees, the pale light glided closer. He could almost hear a faint hum, like metal wings beating softly. The woman's voice broke the silence. "Please," she whispered from behind him, her words trembling. "Do not go." Daniel turned. "Who are they?" Her face went pale. She pressed her son closer and whispered, "Hunters. They search. They never stop. They own us." Her last word hit Daniel like a stone. Own. He looked at the boy curled against her chest, a child born into chains. Rage flickered inside him. The hum outside grew louder. Daniel shut the door and locked it. The fire inside the cabin cracked, but its warmth no longer comforted him. His eyes fell on the woman again. "If you want me to protect you, then I need the truth." She bowed her head, her voice shaking. "I escaped. Long ago my people were broken. The strong became masters, the weak became slaves. I ran, I hid, but they follow. Always they follow." Daniel's hand tightened on his rifle. He had heard of men hunting deer, wolves, even each other. But this was something worse. This was a hunt without mercy across worlds. The boy stirred, his dark eyes opening. He stared at Daniel and spoke softly, almost like a warning. "They find us. Always find us." Daniel crouched by him, his voice steady but gentle. "Not tonight. Not while you're here." The boy blinked at him, then buried his face again in his mother's arms. A sudden crash shook the cabin. Daniel jumped, his rifle snapping to his shoulder. The noise came from the woods, something heavy landing on wet ground. Then a second crash, then a third. Footsteps, huge, deliberate, marching closer. The woman gasped. She clutched her son and whispered a string of words Daniel could not understand. Tears glistened in her eyes. She looked at Daniel, her voice breaking. "They know. They come now?" Daniel's pulse thundered. He had fought wolves before. He had faced men who wanted his land. But this was not wolves, not men. This was something far beyond him. Yet when he looked at the mother and child, he knew there was no choice. He could not give them up. He could not open the door and push them into the night. If he did, he would never forgive himself. The hum outside grew sharp, like blades slicing the air. A voice echoed through the forest, metallic, booming, in a language Daniel did not know. Still, he felt the meaning. It was a demand. A command. The woman flinched at the sound. She whispered, "They say, surrender." "Give us back." Daniel's stomach twisted. He raised his rifle, though he knew it was little more than wood and steel against whatever stood outside. He muttered under his breath, "Not in this life." The cabin walls trembled. Shadows moved across the windows. Through the glass, Daniel saw shapes, tall, armored figures glowing faintly in the rain. Machines walked beside them, light scanning the ground. They were searching, marking every step. One of the voices rang out again, deeper this time, almost human but cold as stone. "Give us the fugitives. No harm will come to you, human. Resist and you will be destroyed." The words shook Daniel to his bones. They knew him. They knew this place. They had spoken in his tongue. He glanced at the woman. She was shaking her head, silently begging him. "Do not trust. Do not surrender." Daniel's hand gripped the rifle tighter. His jaw set hard. "If they want you," he muttered, "they'll have to come through me." The boy whimpered softly. The mother pulled him close, tears falling down her strange face. Daniel turned to them, his voice low but firm. "Stay near the fire. Don't move until I say." Then he stepped toward the door. His hands were steady now, though his heart roared like thunder. The hunters had come. The storm had brought them to his door, but he was not just a man with a lonely cabin anymore. Tonight he was a shield. He pressed his ear to the wooden door, listening as the footsteps drew closer, closer, closer. And when the silence fell again, heavy and deep, Daniel knew the hunters were right outside. The cabin walls shook as if the forest itself was breathing. Outside, the hunters stood in the rain. Their shadows stretched long and cruel against the wet ground, their voices echoing with metallic weight. "Give them up. Humans, surrender and live." Daniel stood at the door, his rifle tight in his hands. His finger brushed the trigger, but he did not fire, not yet. He was only one man with wood and iron. They were armored giants with machines of light and thunder, yet fear did not chain him. Something stronger did. Behind him by the fire, the alien mother clutched her son close. The boy's wide eyes locked on Daniel, silently asking, "Will you protect us? Or send us away?" Daniel's jaw clenched. He had lived a lonely life, hiding from the world, telling himself he needed no one. But now he saw the truth. He had something worth standing for. The hunters waited, the silence pressed like a blade against his throat. Then Daniel made his choice. He bolted the door, slid the wooden bar across, and turned toward the woman. "They're not getting in here." Not without a fight, her lips trembled. "You fight for us?" Daniel's eyes were hard, but his voice was steady. "No one hunts children. Not while I'm breathing." The boy's eyes shimmered, and for the first time he gave Daniel a small, hopeful smile. But Daniel knew hope alone could not win. He needed a plan. He set his rifle aside for a moment and moved quickly around the cabin, pulling open drawers, grabbing tools, ropes, nails. His hands moved with the steady rhythm of a man who had spent years surviving alone. The woman watched, confused. What you do?" "Setting traps," Daniel muttered. "They want to hunt? Then I'll make sure the forest bites back." He stepped outside, moving carefully through the rain. The hunters' lights were still distant, scanning the trees. Daniel slipped into the shadows, his boots silent in the mud. He set snares between roots, sharpened stakes in the earth, tripwires hidden under leaves. Old tricks. Primitive, yes, but deadly if used well. The forest had always been his ally. Tonight it would become his battlefield. When he returned to the cabin, the woman was waiting at the door. She held out something wrapped in cloth. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a small silver shard that glowed faintly. "This help?" she said, her words broken. "From my world energy." Daniel frowned, unsure, but he took it. The shard pulsed softly, warm in his palm. He did not understand it, but he saw how her eyes pleaded with him. It was all she could give. He nodded once. "Then we fight together." The night dragged on, each second heavy. The hunters grew closer, their steps shaking the earth. One by one, their lights cut through the storm. Then a voice boomed again. "Last chance, human. Hand them over." Daniel raised his rifle, pressed his back against the door, and shouted through the storm, "Come and take them." The forest exploded with sound. Branches cracked, footsteps thundered. The hunters moved. Daniel's trap sprung first. A wire snapped tight, pulling one giant down into a pit of sharpened stakes. Its metallic roar echoed as sparks flew. Another hunter's leg caught in a hidden snare, the rope dragging it sideways as Daniel's axe swung down from a tree, striking with brutal force. But the hunters were not animals. They adapted fast. Their machines whirred, scanning, cutting through his tricks. Soon one stepped into the clearing, towering over the cabin. Its armor gleamed under the storm and its faceplate glowed red. Daniel fired. The bullet struck its chest, sparking, but the creature only laughed, its voice deep and cruel. "You cannot win, human." The sound chilled Daniel's blood. But he did not lower his rifle. He fired again and again, each shot echoing like thunder through the forest. The hunter staggered, slowed, but it did not fall. Inside the cabin, the boy whimpered. The woman pressed her forehead to his, whispering words in her language, prayers of fear and hope. Outside, Daniel reloaded, his hands steady despite the storm. His heart roared inside his chest, but his will was iron. "You're right," he muttered, staring at the hunter. "Maybe I can't win." He raised the glowing shard in his other hand. The energy pulsed brighter, reacting to the storm, to the metal giant before him. "But I can fight." He slammed the shard into the rifle, the wood and steel humming with alien power. Lightning seemed to crackle along the barrel. For the first time, the hunter stepped back. Daniel grinned, cold and sharp. "Now let's see who bleeds." The storm answered with a crash of thunder. The hunters roared as one, closing in, their shadows blotting out the trees. The battle for the cabin had begun. The night did not end. It stretched on like a wound that refused to close. The storm still whispered through the trees, but the louder sound was the memory of battle. Daniel sat on the cabin floor, his rifle beside him, his shirt torn at the shoulder where a hunter's blade had cut close. His chest rose and fell with exhaustion, but his eyes stayed sharp. He was alive. They were alive. For now. Across the fire, the alien woman washed his wound with a piece of cloth. She did not speak much, but her hands were careful, almost gentle. Daniel winced at the sting, but he did not move away. For the first time, he allowed another soul to tend to him. The boy sat close, staring at Daniel with wide, curious eyes. He held a small wooden spoon in his hands, tapping it softly against his leg. Finally, he whispered, "Uncle." Daniel blinked. He looked at the boy, unsure if he had heard right. The woman's lips curved into the faintest smile. She touched her son's shoulder and said softly, "Uncle." "Human." The word echoed inside Daniel's chest like a spark of warmth in the middle of all the cold. For years he had been no one's family, no one's friend. But here in his small cabin, a child from another world had given him a name. Uncle. He cleared his throat, trying to push away the sudden emotion. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice rough. "Both of you." But sleep did not come easy. Outside, the hunters were not gone. Their shadows still moved in the trees, testing, watching. They had lost some of their own, but they were patient. They would return with fire and fury. Daniel knew it. The woman knew it. Even the boy seemed to know it. By morning, the storm had broken and the forest lay wet and heavy with mist. Daniel stepped outside, his boots sinking into the mud. The traps he had set were torn and broken. Black marks scarred the earth where alien weapons had burned through wood and stone. The hunters had tested his defenses and nearly broken them. He tightened his grip on the rifle. "Next time," he muttered, "I'll be ready." When he returned inside, he found the woman waiting. She had placed her hand on the wall of the cabin, her fingers moving as if tracing the wood. Her eyes were thoughtful, almost sad. "You stay here long time?" she asked slowly. Daniel nodded. "Years, alone." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Alone is heavy." Her words cut through him sharper than any blade. He opened his mouth to answer but found no reply. She was right. Alone was heavy. The boy, meanwhile, was exploring the cabin. He touched the shelves, the jars, the small wooden carvings Daniel had made over the years to keep his hands busy. His laughter filled the cabin when he found a small carved bear. He held it up proudly, showing it to his mother, then placed it on the table beside Daniel's rifle as if to say, "This is ours now." Daniel stared at the boy, then at the mother. A strange thought crept into his mind. What if they stayed? He pushed it away quickly. This was only meant to be one night. One night of shelter, and yet... The woman broke his thoughts. She spoke, her voice low. "Hunters will come back. They always come back. They burn until nothing left." Daniel looked at her, his jaw tight. "Then we fight harder." She shook her head. "You are only man. They are many. Strong. Ruthless." Her eyes dropped to the floor, filled with sorrow. But Daniel saw something else there too, guilt. As if she hated herself for bringing this danger to his door. He stepped closer, his voice steady. "I've lived my whole life running from people. Running from the world. Maybe this is my time to stop running." She lifted her eyes to him. They glistened, reflecting the fire's light. For a moment she almost smiled, but it faded quickly. Suddenly the boy's small voice cut through the silence. "They come," he said, pointing to the window. Daniel froze. He rushed to the window and looked out. At first he saw nothing but mist and trees. Then a glow, bright and unnatural. A fire moving through the forest, not lightning, not torches. The hunters were sending a warning. The glow grew larger as flames licked up the sides of trees. Smoke curled into the sky, black and choking. They were burning the forest to drive them out. The woman clutched her son tightly, her body trembling. Daniel's blood boiled. The forest had been his home for years, his only companion. Now it was being destroyed just to flush out a mother and her child. His fists clenched. "They want to scare us," he growled. "But all they've done is make me angry." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "They will not stop. If you stay with us, they burn your world too." Daniel turned, his face hard, his voice unshakable. "Then let them burn. I'll still be standing." The boy looked at him, his eyes shining with trust, and placed the wooden bear back into Daniel's hand. The hunter's fire raged closer, the sky turning red with smoke. The cabin shook with distant roars. Daniel gripped the rifle and the bear together, two worlds in his hands. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing. He was no longer just a man in a lonely cabin. He was a protector, and this family, though not his by blood, was his to defend. And when the hunters came again, he would be ready. The forest was burning. Orange flames crawled up the tall pines, smoke curling into the night sky. The hunters had set the woods alight, their cruel way of flushing prey from hiding. Sparks rained against the cabin roof as Daniel stood in the doorway, his rifle in one hand, the alien shard glowing faintly in the other. The woman held her son close, her face pale with fear. The boy pressed against her, silent but wide-eyed, his small hands gripping her sleeve. Daniel's eyes swept across the cabin, his home, his walls, the life he had built in solitude. It was not much, but tonight it was his fortress. He turned to the woman. "We fight here." Her lips trembled. "No, you die here." Daniel's jaw tightened. Better to die standing than running. For a long moment she stared at him. Then she nodded. Slowly she set her son down on the bed and stepped closer. Her hands moved quickly over the strange shard, her alien fingers pressing patterns Daniel could not understand. The shard flared brighter, humming with power. "Your weapon," she said, pushing it toward him. Now strong, Daniel fitted the shard into his rifle again. This time the wooden iron shook as if alive. A faint blue glow ran along the barrel, sharp as lightning. He tested the trigger. The weapon hummed like thunder caged inside. The woman moved to the walls, her hands tracing strange symbols in the air. The marks glowed briefly, and Daniel felt the cabin itself tighten, as if she was weaving some invisible shield around them. "It will not last long," she warned. "But it may be enough," Daniel nodded. "Enough is all I need." The ground outside trembled. The hunters were coming. Their heavy steps shook the earth. The boy whimpered softly, covering his ears as the deep metallic voices rose again. "Human. Last warning. Surrender them or burn with them." Daniel stepped forward, his face lit by fire and smoke. He shouted back through the storm of sound. "Come and take them." The hunters roared. Then they charged. The first broke through the mist, its armor glowing, its weapon raised. Daniel fired. The shard-powered rifle cracked like thunder. Blue light slammed into the hunter's chest and the armored giant was thrown back, sparks flying from its body as it crashed into the burning trees. But more followed. 3, 4, 5, shadows closing in from all sides. They fired beams of light that struck the cabin, shaking the walls. The woman's shield flared, sparks scattering across the room, holding, barely. Daniel fired again and again, each shot shaking his arms. Hunters fell, but others rose. Their machines marched forward, red light sweeping through the smoke. The woman knelt by her son, whispering, "Stay, little one. Do not move." Then she rose and joined Daniel, her eyes glowing faintly. She picked up an axe that leaned against the wall and held it awkwardly, but with determination. Daniel glanced at her. "You ever use one of those?" She shook her head. "No, but I can learn." He gave her the smallest smile in the middle of the chaos. "Good enough." The next hunter smashed through the shield, its massive arm crashing into the cabin wall. Daniel spun and fired point blank, the blast tearing through armor. The woman swung the axe, striking hard, sparks flying as metal cracked. Together they brought the giant down, but the cabin was falling apart. The walls groaned. Smoke poured in. The boy coughed, his small body shaking. Daniel's heart pounded. They couldn't hold much longer. He pulled the woman close. "Take your boy. If I fall, you run." She shook her head fiercely. No, if you fall, we all fall. The hunters circled, their leader stepping forward. Taller than the rest, its armor black, its voice deep and cruel. Enough games. You are nothing, human. One night of defiance does not change the order of the stars. Daniel leveled his rifle at the leader, his voice iron. Maybe not, but it changes this night. The leader raised its weapon. The two locked eyes through the storm of fire and smoke. For a heartbeat, the forest was silent. Then everything exploded. The hunters rushed the cabin. Daniel fired again and again, the shard glowing brighter, each shot tearing through steel. The woman fought beside him, her alien strength surprising even her. The boy screamed for them, his voice filled with fear and love. The battle raged, wood splintering, fire roaring, metal crashing. Daniel's arms ached, his shoulder bled, but he would not stop, not now. Not ever. Finally, the cabin walls gave way, collapsing under the hunter's fury. The roof cracked, beams falling as fire spread. The boy cried out, trapped under smoke and falling ash. Daniel dropped his rifle and lifted the beam with both arms, muscles straining. "Go!" he shouted. "Get him out!" The woman pulled her son free, clutching him close. But the leader was there, stepping through the fire, its red eyes burning. Daniel grabbed his rifle one last time. His body screamed with pain, his lungs burned. But his will stood unbroken. He raised the weapon, the shard glowing like a star in his hands. The leader growled, "You are only man." Daniel's voice was low, fierce, unyielding. "I'm enough." He pulled the trigger. The cabin vanished in a flash of light. The flash lit the forest like a second sun. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to stop. Fire froze in the air. Hunters stood still, and the storm went silent. Then came the crash, a roar so loud it split the night in two. When the smoke cleared, the cabin was gone. Its roof had collapsed, its walls shattered into blackened beams. The air reeked of ash and scorched metal. The hunters lay scattered across the mud, their armor cracked, their machines broken. Some twitched weakly, sparks spitting from their bodies. Others did not move at all. And in the center of it all, Daniel stood. His clothes were torn, his face burned, his rifle nothing but smoking fragments in his hands. The alien shard had shattered, leaving only faint blue dust glowing across the ground. He swayed on his feet, blood dripping down his arm, but his eyes still burned with fire. He was alive. The alien woman stumbled out from behind a fallen beam, clutching her son. She froze when she saw Daniel. Her lips parted, her breath caught. She had expected to see only ruin. But there he was. Broken, yes, but standing. The boy squirmed from her arms and ran forward. "Uncle!" he cried, his voice small but full of life. He threw his arms around Daniel's leg. Daniel dropped what was left of his weapon and knelt, gathering the child into his arms. For the first time in years, he felt something deeper than survival. He felt family. The woman approached slowly, her eyes shimmering. She knelt beside them, her hands trembling as she touched Daniel's burned shoulder. Her voice cracked. "You saved us. You saved him." Daniel looked at her, then at the boy, and shook his head. "No, he saved me." The forest groaned around them. Trees burned, smoke drifted high. But the hunters, those who survived, were retreating. Their leader was gone, destroyed by Daniel's final strike. And without their master, the rest scattered into the flames, vanishing into the night. The mother stared after them, her face still tense. They will come back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they never stop. Daniel rose slowly, his body aching, the boy still clinging to his hand. He looked out at the forest, at the ruins of his cabin, at the destruction left behind. Then he spoke, his voice steady. "Let them come." The woman blinked. "You are only man. You cannot fight whole empire." Daniel turned to her, his expression fierce but calm. "Maybe I can't fight an empire, but I can fight for you, for him, and that's enough." The boy looked up, his small eyes shining with pride. He whispered again, the word that had become more than a word. "Uncle." Something inside Daniel shifted. For years he had lived in silence, pushing the world away. Now he realized the truth. He had not been waiting for peace. He had been waiting for them days past. They rebuilt together. The woman taught Daniel small tricks with the little alien knowledge she still carried. How to strengthen wood, how to make fire burn cleaner, how to sharpen old tools into something stronger. Daniel showed her how to set snares, how to track deer, how to cook bread over fire. The boy laughed louder each day, chasing birds, running between the trees, carrying the small wooden bear everywhere he went. One evening, As the sun set and the forest glowed gold, Daniel sat with the boy on his knee. The child pointed to the sky, where faint stars were already waking. "They are out there," the boy said. "Hunters. Bad ones." Daniel looked at the stars. They did not frighten him anymore, he nodded. "Yes, but now they know something they didn't before." The boy tilted his head. "What?" Daniel's eyes were hard as steel, but his voice was calm. "That humans fight back." The boy smiled, leaning his head against Daniel's chest. The woman sat beside them, quiet, but at peace. She looked at Daniel, her lips curving into the first true smile he had seen from her. "You give us home," she whispered. "Forever." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at the small cabin rising again from ashes, at the fire warming their new walls, at the boy's laughter echoing into the trees. For the first time in his life, the silence was gone. He was not alone. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and another on the mother's. His voice was steady, filled with quiet strength. "Then this is where we stay. Together." The forest sighed around them, the flames finally dying, the night settling into calm. Somewhere deep among the stars, hunters plotted their return. But here, on this patch of earth, in a rebuilt cabin at the edge of the woods, a single human had made a stand. And when the hunters came again, they would not only face a man, they would face a family,